Hello, my name is Barbara Cooper and this is the fifth in a series of videotapes that we've made for you, the non-florist. This is the one we've been asked to do the most times. It's all about drying flowers, drying techniques and how to arrange them. We haven't gone into too much detail on the actual tape about the concoctions that you'll need for drying in themselves, because we've written it all down for you to save you having to go off and get pen and paper to actually do it as we're talking to you. So don't worry about anything, just have a look at the booklet when we've finished. When you go out into the garden, I'm sure you're going to have a whole new look at the different seed pods and heads that you can be using in this video. Then you can dry them, and during the winter months when it's cold and grey outside, you can have great fun indoors doing all the arrangements. And it will give you great pleasure, and you can give them away for Christmas or for other family occasions. So have a look at the videotape, and if you've been lucky and had flowers given you recently, then look at them and take out the ones that you think will be able to dry, and then you've got a nice memento of the occasion for your bouquet or whatever you've been given. So have a look at the tape, think what you can do, and go out and get the bits from the garden or from your florist shop and enjoy doing it. So just don't worry about anything, have a look, and we'll see you at the end of the tape. Thank you. Dried flower arranging over the last few years has really taken on a good vogue. More and more people want to do it, and I think it's mainly because you can go out into the garden, and in the autumn time and the late summer you can collect all the bits that you need, and then you can do all your Christmas arranging and your winter arranging with them. You can of course buy them already dried, which is cheating somewhat, but of course you can get a greater variety that way. In front of us here we have a variety of things that we've picked from the garden fairly recently, and ones that have been dried and bought as well. Let me just run through them for you. These are grasses, and these can be picked in the late summer when they're just in the flowering season, and you hang them up and dry them, and some Aquilegia seed heads, some bits of bracken which I'll show you later on how to dry. These are the poppy seed heads from the very big red poppies, and of course you can get the small ones going right down to the very small Icelandic poppy heads. These are the fresh heads of the curry plant, but they dry off and keep their nice yellow colour. We have lavender, which does have a tendency to drop its little poddy bits, but it has a lovely smell. We have the big green pods of the iris, and the very old heads of the bluebells that flowered in the spring, with a few rushes that are just coming into flower. The docks are a nuisance in the garden, but they actually are very good for drying off. You want them when they're nice and green, because if you get them brown, they soon shed all the little bits off. This is a hosta seed head. The hostas a lot of flower ranges like because they use the leaves, but don't forget you can use the seed pods as well. Coming through to the trees, the ash trees have keys, which are very good for drying as well. The leaves aren't so good, but you can take the keys off and dry them. Then there's the laburnum, which has seed pods, but if you're going to collect those, don't forget they're deadly poisonous to children, so keep them well away if you're going to take the seeds from those. Then we have the beech, and on the beech at this time of year you'll find the beech nuts or masts, and those are the ones that you can dry, as well as glycerining the foliage. Bracken is everywhere, and this is just a naturally hung up and dried piece, and these are the ones that have been glycerined and kept flat. They do tend to have a slightly sticky appearance though, whereas these are as dry as a bone and can be used in anything. These are bought and they can be in green or brown, but I'll show you how to do your own later on. Also, of course, you can do oak leaves in the glycerining and the beech. This was the green beech before it was glycerined. Unfortunately, all glycerined leaves go brown, in varying shades. They go from sort of a very light pale brown to a very almost dark chocolatey brown. This is eucalyptus. You can buy eucalyptus from your local florist, or a lot of people now have them in the garden. They're very fast growing trees, and if it's got too big for you, then cut it up and hang it up and you can dry it, and they're very useful for putting in as a filler for dried arrangements, and it also has a really nice smell on the leaf. Lime, that's another nice type of tree. These ones, I'm afraid, have had suffered from this wet summer, but these will eventually form a nice little ball, and what we do is we call them stripped lime, in the fact that you take the leaves off and you get left with your stem with your nice little dangly bits on them, and they look nice sprayed silver for winter. These are very prickly, and they're Mahonia leaves, but these turn a very nice colour when they're dried with the glycerine, or you couldn't just hang these up. But they're a bit tough, so what we suggest for the glycerine is that you just lay them flat in the glycerine mixture, cover them with a cloth soaked in the glycerine and mixture, so that they actually get all the hard bits to soak it up. This is dried statice, the Damosa statice. This is the one that you'll see mostly used as fillings, because to cover the oasis or the foam is very difficult, so we tend to use this as a filler. This is Achillea, which has been dried, and again this is very useful as using as a base flower or as a nice tall one for your big arrangements. These are hydrangea heads. They come in a variety of colours, and most people have got these in their gardens or they know people that have got them. They're very good for drying. This is one that's been dried from last year, but it was a bit old when it was taken, so that you can see it's lost some of its colour. But as a base flower, it's quite a useful thing to use. Now these dry either by hanging them upside down, or they suggest that the best thing to do is to just put them in a glass of water with only about ½ an inch and let it suck it up gently on its own until it's dried out naturally that way. Also, heathers are done the same way. You just let them drink up the little drop of water, and then when they've drunk it up, they should be dry, starting to dry out in 2 to 3 weeks. This is a hop wreath. You can see all the tendrils where it hooks on, and what you do is you either buy these, but if you happen to have got a hop bush locally, then you can just cut the thicker stems off, and you just twist them round on themselves and just catch them every so often with their tendrils so that you form a fairly stiff wreath. But they're nice for using as bases for putting your dried flowers on, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, these. Basket work is really quite a nice thing to use with the dried things, and you can either make your own by just cutting up some stems of willow and nailing them together, forming a basket like that. And you don't need a base in this, because obviously the dried things aren't going to use the water, and bend a handle round for the top. Or you can have these little type of teapots and kettles that come from the Philippine type places, and also a nice basket of cones, which we can use the cones later on. I'll show you how to wire those up. The thing you're going to need most is a block of oasis or foam. This is the dry foam block, and it nearly always comes in the brown, although now there's a green one. Do make sure that you've bought the dry foam, because it's much stiffer and it holds the stems better. If you've only got the wet foam, make sure of course that you don't wet it at all, otherwise the stems will rot off eventually. This comes in a ball, or you can get it in a big block if you're going to do a lot of flower arranging. And as a cone. This is nice for Christmas, when you can cover it with cones and little nuts and things. You're going to need some wires. There's 3 different types that I'm going to use: the long green, the short green, and the silver wires. And you'll need some tape to go over these if you don't want your stems to show too much. And also you'll need some stem pot tape to go around to keep your oasis in place. And a dish is always a useful thing, either a saucer or a bought dish, and a little frog with some sticky tape at the bottom to stick it to the bottom of your dish. Also at the front here we have a few of the winter type things. There's a beech mast which has lost its little inner seeds, some heads of oak. This is a fairly unusual oak with a furry outer cap, some pine needles which we can wire together, some bits of twig and cones. Cones are very useful in all different shapes and sizes. If you wanted to, of course, you could buy them as a box full of dried mixed things. This is a mixture of dried grasses, and this is a dried grass mix that has been actually, as you can see, dyed red. They come in all sorts of shades, but they're very useful if you just want to do one type of colouring. So now we can get on and we can show you what we're going to do. This is the simplest form of basket. It's a flat basket, and I think you'll find these easier to get almost anywhere. You're also going to need a frog with a piece of fix at the bottom, which you push into the weave at the bottom so it sticks well. You're going to need a knife so that you can cut your block, and it's the most horrible sound. It goes right through you. It's a bit like doing your fingernails down a blackboard. That we push onto there, like that. Then we get our bits of foliage to put those in first. This is a piece of bracken. There are two ways of doing bracken. You can either do it in glycerine, or you can put it underneath a carpet. It's a very useful old-fashioned method of drying, is that you literally get your bracken in the autumn before it gets too old, and you lay some newspaper under your mat or your carpet, and you put your bracken flat underneath there for a few months. And it's a very good way of drying them out and not having to spend any money out. Also keeps the fronds nice and flat. If you're glycerining, the mixture that one normally uses is 1 part of glycerine to 2 parts of boiling water. It takes 2 or 3 weeks for it to suck it up and to turn to the brown colour. But then, of course, you've got it for years. But to save wasting the glycerine, do make sure that you actually have perfect leaves in the first place. Don't go putting in big chunks that the animals have eaten. Otherwise, when you take it out when it's glycerined, it's not going to look very nice. This is a piece of oak, just for the front. This is the statice, which is very useful because, of course, it's very difficult to try and hide these bits of foam because the dry things tend to be fairly thin and they don't cover the oasis or foam very well. A lot of people can do these very tight, so you almost get a total circle of the statice before you actually start. On this one I'm just using a little to cover up the front, and I'm going to use the hydrangea head to help with the rest. A lot of people do the dried flower arranging in the autumn for the winter time, and then in the summer they throw them out because they get a bit too dusty, and then they start again ready for the winter the following year. Provided the things are kept in a very dry place and out of direct sunlight, they will last for a number of years, but usually it's the dust that gets them before anything else. These are broom heads. It must be a continental broom because our broom doesn't look anything like that. But again, it's a nice dainty outside useful for making things look fairy-like. And also they're very cheap to buy and you get a lot for your money. You could use Gypsophila if you've been given a fresh arrangement or a bouquet with Gypsophila in it. That's a very easy thing to dry. You just literally hang it up in your airing cupboard or a cool, dark place and let it dry off naturally. If, of course, you've been lucky enough to be a lady with an Aga or a Rayburn type of cooker, then, of course, you're going to have a nice lot of warm heat coming in your kitchen and you've got a nice place to hang your flowers to dry above it, which are very useful. They dry off a lot quicker like that. If you leave them in the sunlight for too long, they will fade and go a totally different colour, which is sad, because they will need to be sprayed then to get any colour back on them. You can buy almost a car spray if you wanted to just to make them colourful. But the only thing is, it does take a while for the paint smell to wear off. This is Achillea. We showed you earlier the yellow variety. This is one that's been bleached and it's been just sprayed pink, which is quite a nice, if you've got a baby in the family and it happens to be a baby girl, this is quite a nice arrangement to give as a permanent thing for the home. These are teasels, and what's happened here is that they've been taken off their normal natural stem, which is very prickly. They've been sprayed pink and they've just had the bottom shaved off because it's hollow in the middle and a cane stuck up, so you're not going to get mega prickled trying to put them in, although this top bit hooks into your clothing if you're not careful. They come in a variety of colours and they make a very nice centre to draw your eye into the middle of the arrangement. We usually tend to use these very big things in 3s or 5s as a line through the arrangement. This is Honesty, and it's another thing that most people have in the garden or might know that their friends have got in their garden. Usually it's a very silvery colour, and in the late summer you'll have these pods that have shed, and you have two outer petals on here which you just gently twist away, and it leaves you this very pretty silvery coloured inner leaf in the middle. And these have been dyed. You actually buy them this colour, but the silvery ones look just as nice, and they're natural, of course, but they're very delicate and you do tend to get them bashed around if you're not careful. They hook out these little tiny bits and you get left with just a little circle. As a child, we always called these fairies' letters because we were always told that the fairies wrote their letters on these papers and left them there for their elves to find. I'm trying to keep them into groups so that you can see I've got a group here, and then you've got your grouping in the middle and your group coming on the other side. And these are little tails, rabbit's tails. This is the natural colour as it happens, and they just fit in nicely with the pink shades. You can either put them in as a group or singly. You have to be quite careful how you push these fairly thin stems into your base because they do tend to break off quite quickly and easily. If you wanted to, you could just wire the group together, which I'll show you how to do. If you get 2 or 3 of your stems together, whatever it is that you want to wire, get them in your right length, and then you take your wire and just hook it back so it's like a hairpin, and you just twist it around the stems at the bottom there like that, so it's mounted, in other words, so that the wires take the strain in your arrangement. Cut it off level because you don't want them too big. And if you wanted to, you could take, this is a variety of tape which isn't sticky, but it does stick on itself with the heat of your fingers, and you hold it down there with your thumb and your next finger, and you twist. This one twists and this one just pulls gently on the stem text to bring it down to the bottom so that it's covered and it doesn't look an unsightly piece of wire. If you've seen the tape Flowers for Your Wedding, where we've done all different types of wiring, you'll obviously know all about that, so you won't have to worry about trying to learn to do the wiring. Right, just a few more of these. Again, the hairpin down, twist around, cut it off a bit shorter, and tape it up. Also, taping does help to stop it rusting. The uncoated silver wires or the brown stub wires do tend to rust quite easily, and it's a shame if you get all your stems rusted in case you want to use them again for something else. Just look at the front here. I'm doing it so that you can see what I'm doing. So obviously I can't see into the middle here very easily. So sometimes I get a little gap left. There we are. Now this is quite a loose basket. A lot of the baskets you find, as I say, tend to be very stiff with everything on a level. This is a nice loose basket. With dried flowers, of course, you can use all sorts of interesting containers. This is a replica of an old iron, and this is the green dry foam, which you push into there. If it's too big, then you can carve off a piece at the top. And just up the side slightly, because you don't need the foam to keep the stems alive. So you will find this dry foam is very sticky. Well, it's not sticky, but it sticks to your fingers. And if you're not careful and you go and wipe your eyes, you'll find that you'll get all these little tiny bits, and it irritates your skin. Right. This is quite a good idea if you haven't got a lot of status to cover your foam with. It's moss, which you can dry off in a nice warm place, and it covers the foam very nicely for you, and it's a natural looking greenery, and it holds its colour very well once it's dried. Just if you've got a nice warm cooker that you can suspend an open weave basket with the moss in, so it dries off nice and quickly above it, and that's a very good way of doing it. I'm not doing the back because I'm just going to do a fairly front-facing one, so I don't need the moss on this side for myself. A lot of people like to grow their own flowers in the summertime, and these are the helichrysums, which is a very dry flower when it's fresh in the first place. So what you need to do is to have a stub wire, which is usually this brown one, because you actually want it to rust into the flower, and therefore it's going to hold the head in. And while it's green, when you've just picked it, you just push the wire, make a hole and just push it through so that it stays nice and firm into the top of the flower like that. And then what I do is I just put them all onto a block and let them dry off. And then after a few weeks you'll find that the wires have rusted into the back and you can't actually pull them off at all. If you've missed them and they've got too hard, then you'll have to get a glue gun and just put a little dab of glue and put your wire onto it that way, but it is a lot more fiddly and time consuming. Or you could push it through and hook it back, but if you catch them nice and green when they're first picked, when they're about this size, then you shouldn't have any problem. Don't pick them too open, because what happens is that they carry on opening and the seeds in the middle here will actually take over and the whole flower will puff open and it won't be any use. So cut them when they're about the size of a 50p and let them carry on opening for just a little bit more as they dry. But it's a very cheap, and you get loads of different colours, and they're very useful things for filling in at the bottom as well. So we're going to use the green bracken in this. Again, I told you how to glycerine these or to lay them underneath the carpet, and this is how it looks when it's fresh. This is a fern, but the ferns are exactly the same. The bracken has longer fronds, that's all. Again, just lay them underneath the carpet and forget about them between newspaper, or get out the glycerine and glycerine them. This is green and it's a bought one. It has been dyed this colour. If you're doing the glycerining or the ordinary drying, you'll just find that it tends to stay the brown, different shades of brown. It's very useful because you can cut it up in between the joints and you can use them in pairs or as in singles. It's amazing what kinds of flowers you can actually dry. These are just heads of the little chrysanthemum that have been hung up upside down and allowed to dry in a warm, dry place. And also the statice. This is another easy thing for you to grow. This one doesn't come this colour naturally, it's been a dyed one, but you can get them in blues and pinks and whites. We wanted this colour because of obviously keeping the colours for this arrangement. But you could buy these colours from your local garden centre or florist. Start off with your tall, thin flowers at the top. And don't forget, the dried leaves are just as good as the fresh ones for filling in. So don't throw away the bottom of the stems when you've got anything dried. Use all the little bits up. Just to put a few of the helichrysums in. With using the moss as a base, you obviously got a nice free rein as to the shapes and the size that you can put in against it then. Also, with the wires on the helichrysum, it does mean that you can bend your head in any direction that you want without fear of breaking them off. little bits of the statice. The statice is nice because it actually comes on these nice flowing stems, and they are a nice opposite shape to the round of the helichrysum. I think with dried flower arranging it's very important to have different shapes and textures because you haven't got the natural foliage to help you out on that score. And again, just move these over here. We've got the rabbit tails in the nice goldy colour. Again, to bunch or to push in if you're able to as a group. Wire these up. I'm using a green wire this time. I'm not going to put the tape onto these because the green isn't so bad showing as the silver. You only need to tape if you think people are going to see the wires when they've actually been inserted into the foam. There are all sorts of little dried flowers that you can get. Of course, you can't get these very thin stems into the foam, so you have to wire these into little groups. These are like a little star flower. And these come in a multitude of dyed colours as well. The natural colour just being the creamy white. It does tend to be a bit messy doing the dried flowers because you get all these dead stems that get hooked up and get dropped on the floor, and it takes quite a bit of clearing up after you've finished. I'm using the green ones on this because I actually need a thicker bunch. Right, next I'm going to do some cones, because cones are very useful for all types of dried flower arranging and for fresh as well if you actually want to use them in that. What you do is you take a cone that's open, which they obviously will do as soon as they're in the warm of the house, and you slot a wire between the petals of the cone, twisting it round so that when you get to the end you can twist the cone and it twists the wires together like that. And you'll end up with a cone suspended on your wire, which means that you can move it wherever you want to go with it. I'm going to use 3 in this arrangement. Just twist it round till you've got it on your piece. This is a slightly larger one, so I'm using a slightly thicker wire. Right, there's a gap just in here. And the slightly smaller one to come out from the front. And one to come right down. And then you can carry on if you want to, filling in any gaps if you actually want to make it thicker. Get the stem out, thinner wire, twist it round all the way down so it's nicely held. That can go slotted in there. put these in at the back. This is a very nice arrangement for putting, say, on a table for visitors if you've got people coming for a meal. So it doesn't take up too much space, but it's quick to do and it's all round, and you haven't got to worry about expensive containers, and what you're going to put in it is quite simple. You can just go and get most of these things from the garden and dry them off in a few weeks. That's this side filled in, and in a minute we'll show you. If you want to, you could put it on a block of wood or a mat of some sort, which will just bring it away from the base of the table. Driftwood lends itself to dried flowers. This is an exceptionally large lump, but it's ideal for putting into fireplaces or large bay windows. I've just dropped into the gaps that it has here some dry foam into these two places here. I haven't actually attached it to the block because I need to take it off and I can change the arrangement as I want to, so I haven't glued it in any way. But hopefully it'll stay where it's supposed to be. We've got some nice wild oats. The farmers will be very pleased to get rid of these, but they dry beautifully and they have a lovely sort of a greeny look to them. I'm sure if you went down and asked your local farmer if you could buy some wheat or some barley out of the fields when it's green, he'd probably let you buy some. And also it's very good. All you need to do is to hang it upside down and dry it off, and there's 2 or 3 different types, so you can get some nice shapes from that. Another thing that's nice and easy to grow is Love in the Mist, which has these massive seed heads when it's flowered. The flowers, in fact, are blue, so they're not, there's a little dried one there, so they're not exactly very pretty, but the seed heads are lovely. With your booklet that accompanies this video, there'll be all the names of the dried flowers that we've used, so you can look them all up if you can't remember them as we've gone along. Right. First of all, we're going to use some glycerine beech, and as this is going to be quite a large arrangement, obviously you're going to need some fairly big branches. When I said beech, I meant oak. Push them in at the back nice and strongly. Take off anything that's damaged. The thing with doing a fireplace is that obviously you're going to need a fairly large arrangement, and if you haven't got a block of wood, then a big planting bowl would be quite good to use with a piece of oasis in, or you can just put it straight onto the block because you don't need any actual water. So all you need to do is to put your piece of foam into the fireplace and use it straight away from there without bothering about any containers. This is to help cover up the base as well. If anything breaks off, then use your wires to put them back together again, so you can just push them in. These are nice seed pods of the Nicander. I don't think these are English. I don't know where these actually come from, but they're a bit like the Chinese lanterns. So if you've got Chinese lanterns in the garden, they're absolutely wonderful things to actually dry off. Again, just to the air drying, upside down, in a nice warm place in the dark. And they keep their wonderful gold and orange colours. One of the few things that actually stay a lovely orangey colour and a natural, so you haven't got to get anything that's dyed. Also, they're very good for covering up patches of ground because they run with runners underneath and they soon cover up quite a lot of spare ground for you. This is going to be a nice wild one because it suits the wood base to actually have a nice wildish arrangement in it. These are Banksia, and generally they come from places like South Africa where they grow naturally. They do have quite a sharp point on their leaves, and you can take the leaves off if you want to and wire those up to use. But they're very nice big heads. They are slightly heavy, so it does tend to tip your arrangement if you're not careful. You can get all sorts of the dried South African mixes which have wonderful big clumpy seed heads in, which we don't get over here. Again, I've used 3, which is a good amount. 3s or 5s, what we tend to use. These are a bit soft, the stems of the oats, so I do have to wire these up into groups. There are 2 or 3 different ways of drying. You can use the air drying method, which is the simplest, by literally just tying them up into loose bunches and hanging them upside down in a warm, dry place in the dark, which is the most easiest way and I think the way most people would dry things. Or the glycerining, which is slightly more complicated because you actually have to use the mix. Now, if you haven't got any glycerine and you actually want to do some things fairly quickly, then you could use antifreeze, but you need to use 1 part each of water and antifreeze together because it needs to be a bit stronger, and it does the things exactly the same. And you'll see them turning brown through the main stems as the glycerine takes effect. It literally takes out the moisture from the stems and from the leaves and replaces it with the solution so that it stays the colour once it's absorbed it all. And the other method, of course, is to press. It's not so easy for us to show you pressing on this because it's a separate item and people make pictures from those, which most florists don't tend to do. But pressing, the flowers have to be picked, as with anything, in the sunlight and in their best peak of condition, and then you press them either under telephone directories with a big weight on, or with a proper flower press that you can buy nowadays, which screws up tight, and you leave the flowers pressed in those, which is a separate way of doing it. It is described in the booklet though, so if you're interested in that way of doing it, then of course you can look it up there. And there is another way, which is by using silica gel or borax, which is done into a box or a sealed container, and the flowers, you really can only do small flowers, and they're surrounded by the silica gel and borax, and they have their moisture taken out by the crystals themselves, and they will dry the perfect shape that you put into it. But they're very, very delicate, and they're not very easy to use unless they're wired up for the flower arranging type florist or for you, the housewife. They're the ones that you see in these glass domes, which was quite a popular thing a few years ago, and I think the Victorians tended to use them a lot like that. If you're in a hurry to get your bracken done, you could cheat and get some brown paper, and with an iron you can press it under the paper with an iron and dry it out quickly that way round. And nowadays people have been known to use their microwaves to dry off things fairly quickly as well. But I don't like the popping noise that they make as they dry out. It sounds really cruel. This is eucalyptus, which I described earlier. You can get from the florist, or if you've got the eucalyptus tree growing in your garden, it's very useful. Dries out this nice grey colour, and it's pretty good for holding its natural colour. Quite difficult to get your flowers in once you've got your outer bits in for the middle of these. I was trying not to use a lot of flowers, just the, the wild grasses and things. These are shimmery shakes, which I'll show you in a minute, round the front. And again, you can get them if you've got a nice hillside with these actually growing. They grow very well out in the wild, but you have to look for them. They're not very common. Hopefully that's filling in the front there. And on the other side where we've got the Banksia, I'm just going to put a few of the Helichrysum that have been left on their stems. These are the ones we haven't taken off and stuck on a wire. But the only trouble with these is their heads do tend to bend over, which is a bit difficult when you're trying to get a flower to go in one direction or another. But if you don't mind them bending over looking natural, then these are ideal. This is the nice creamy white colour. White does tend to dry nearly always a creamy yellow. It never stays a dead pure white. So sometimes when you have a bride's bouquet dried naturally, you'll find that the flowers, when they come back, when they started off white at your wedding, come back and they've got a rather yucky browny colour, but that is the natural way of it drying by air drying. Just a couple of little poppy heads. These get a bit twiggy. The thing with the poppies is that you can pick the heads when they're nearly dry, and you can sprinkle them so they come up for next year in a bigger amount than you've had the year before, till you get them almost like a weed. I think the big heads are lovely because they are very good for centres of arrangements if you haven't got cones. And you could always have some interesting twists. These are strands that have been twisted around and allowed to dry, so they come out all interesting shapes. If you're lucky enough to have a twisted willow tree in your garden, you're very lucky because you can use those and they've already got a natural twist in them. So if you've got a large garden and you want to plant a tree that's of interest for either fresh or dried, then the twisted willow is a really nice one to put in. But you have to watch the root systems, because of all willows, they tend to get in your water systems, sewage and things, and they quickly take over. So you want to plant them a nice long way away from your house, unless you've got a neighbour that you don't like and you plant it near to them. Oops. Right, hopefully there's no massive gaps at the front. If there is, I hope you'll forgive me because I can't see around the front very well. So hopefully that might give you an idea of a fairly large arrangement using natural things that you could just pop into your fireplace or a big windowsill. This is the straw hat that is plain, and we're going to put flowers all around it and a nice bow at the back. So you're going to need to know how to bow the bows. This is a stripping ribbon, but for showing you how to do it, this is the easiest type to use. You just take a length of ribbon and you leave a trail and you push it to one side and just pinch it slightly in the middle and bring one the same distance the other side, like that. And then holding the middle, you take a thin piece of ribbon and just tie it in a knot and tie it tight together. That way it stops it from flipping open, and you don't need a wire for doing that. And what you can do with the ends is that you can just take your knife or your scissor and just very gently between the end of the scissor and your thumb, bring your hand down so that it curls. And the tighter you pull it, the curlier it will go. If you do it too tight, you can bring it on the other side and straighten it out. And you can bring the bottom together, and then if you want to, just cut a little V in the corner like that. So it makes a nice end, and you can put it onto your hat at the back. This is the one I've already done. This is done in a cotton ribbon, and as opposed to the polyester ribbon, and it just pops on the back with the glue gun, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But while we're on wiring up, I'll show you how to do other bows that are useful for the flowers that you can do later on. You take a length of ribbon, it comes in this width, and you can strip it down into any width you want, wide or thin. And then you can take, to do a little bow for putting into an arrangement, you take the end and push it into your fingers like that. You do another loop and another loop and another loop like that. You can either get them all the same length, or you can make them so that they're slightly different lengths. Then I have to twist it round like that so that it's laying up my hand, and with this finger and the thumb holding these together, I take the wire and just twist it round at the bottom, catching all the bits together. So you have them really attached to your wire, which you need to then just put your tape round. I'll just show you again. Usually we just do two or we do three as a rule if you just want to do a small arrangement like that. cut it off, take the wire, bring it down and make sure you've got it nice and tight. If you just want to use some nice streamers, you literally pull the wire, pull the ribbon out like that, gather them at the top so your streamers are left like that, holding again between your fingers and your thumb, twist so you caught all the ends together, and then just run your scissors down them like that, and you have some nice streamers that you can use with your bows. So we just tape up the top, starting at the top and very slowly pulling it slightly and twisting at the same time with the other hand. I don't need it all the way down so I can smooth it off. Same with the little bows, twisting all the way down so it covers the wire up. The tape comes in quite a variety of colours. We tend to use the white and the green, although there is a brown one which is quite good for dried flowers, so obviously looks just like the dried stem. Good, right, this is the hat, and for this you're going to need the glue gun, which is this, which is, if you've got little children, it's quite dangerous. You definitely don't want them anywhere near you while you're working with the glue gun, because the glue is very hot when it comes out, and believe you me, it jolly well hurts when it gets onto your fingers. But the idea is that we're going to cover the front of the hat with flowers, which would be lovely for a bridesmaid or for a summer wedding. And it's quite easy with the glue gun because you literally can take your flowers and press them into the weave of your hat. So what we do is that we're going to make some outer bits with the statice. So just put your dab of glue onto the back of the statice, keeping your fingers well away, and you press it onto your hat. I usually find it easy to do the outer bits first, and then you can fill in with the other pieces as you want to. Take off any unnecessary stems so they don't have too much to hide. Make sure that the glue is down and gets into the folds of the hat as you go round. At the back here I'm going to have my bow, so I don't need the back covering up. And I'm going to use some of the oak leaves. Again, I'm putting the glue onto the back of them. And before it dries, I quickly put it down onto the hat. If you wanted to, you could put your glue onto the hat. I tend to put it onto the actual thing I'm putting down. Gives you a bit of deeper colour at the back. It's not very easy to use fresh flowers for this because as it dries out, the stems lose their water content. They tend to have a habit of falling off if you've just glue gun fresh stems to this. So they have to be nice and dry. Then we've taken some helichrysum heads, which I'm going to put around, and some little bits of broom for a bit of colour. If you want to, you can just wire these up with a thin silver wire so it keeps them in a bunch, so that when you glue it like that, you've got a nice tight base for the glue to go onto. Use those in a minute. create a nice double glue onto the back of the helichrysum head as you push it on, because it tends to stick a bit up from the hat otherwise. You can intersperse ribbons if you want to, and if you've got a matching outfit that you want to use your ribbons from that, you can put them on the hat at the same time as you're gluing the flower heads on. And you can use your little bits of Honesty. And you go around repeating a fairly similar pattern. Just do make sure that you keep your fingers well away from the glue, because it does hurt if it sticks to your fingers. And you have to go rushing off to the sink to get some cold water to stop it setting too hard, so you can peel it off. I rather like these little rabbits' tails. That one on when I'm there. Oops. Make sure they're pressed down so they stick. Take another head of Honesty so that it keeps fairly similar on this side. I think you will find that you will need some silver wires for this, as well as your glue gun. On the back side, and if you want to, you can add some different seed heads if you want to. These are the Nigella orientalis, which is the same as Love in the Mist, but the oriental one, so it's quite a nice spiky effect. Went to wire that up and didn't need to. The thing with the glue gun is that you can just push it in so that it lays on the flowers that are there and it sticks to them. Which is quite nice. You could just use one side of the hat, so it's just like a corsage type of spray on the side for a wedding is quite nice as well, rather than going all the way around. And you can always make sure that you get a bit to come up the brim. So you can have just a little group on the brim like that, and then coming up the side. So it looks like a little heather spray. On the helichrysum head. As you can see, it's not too difficult to do, and it will save you quite a bit of money if you had to go and buy something like this from a hat shop or from a florist. These hats also look very nice put up on the wall as a wall hanger, so that when you finished it, you just put a little ribbon at the back, either sewn on or glue gunned on strongly, and then you can hang them on the wall. These were quite popular a few years ago as a wall hanging filler. A little bit more of the yarrow or achillea. And because you're going to do it yourself, you can choose obviously the colours to match your own outfit, or your little girl's outfit, so you haven't got the problem of trying to look for a hat with only those colours on. You can mix and match as you like. Right. All we've got to do at the back in a minute is just to put the bow on. Just put a bit down this side so that they look fairly equal. There are all sorts of dried things on the market now. You can even buy dried fruit slices of apples and pears and oranges. So if you wanted to, you can make yourself a fruit hat with these dried slices. Right, the idea is that you just go around your hat like that, filling in, making a pattern as pretty as you want to do. This is the nice bow to go on the back. Put your glue gun on the back and just finish it off. So you put a good dab of glue on the back because you want it to stay on well. And believe you me, on this straw hat, it's quite difficult to get them off should you have a need to. So there you go, either a hat to wear or a hat for your wall. And of course you can use, basing the same idea, you can use all sorts of wooden bases or cork bases and do a fairly similar idea by just taking a section and glue gunning it onto the base of the cork or the wood. I'm going to use this piece of cork board as a front-facing triangular arrangement because it's one of the technical ones that you quite often get in flower arranging. This is a big lump of cork, the actual proper cork with the wood in the middle, not the prefabricated cork boards. So I've stuck my frog and my tack to there, and that's the piece of dry foam to go on the middle of it. Right, I'm going to cover it with a piece of moss, the dry moss, like that, so that helps to cover the base to start off with. I'm trying to get some nice interesting bits to show you. This is a stem of cotton. It's the actual cotton not taken off the seed pods, but it looks quite effective. And it's quite an unusual thing to find, but it's a bit tall, so I'm going to cut that from there and use that nice big piece as my back. You want to start at the back of the foam so that you've got all the space at the front to work from. Otherwise you'll find the whole thing will tip over when you get all the weight of the flowers in the front. Just get the cotton in first because it's a bit bulky. It made a line with those. Oh, I'm going to get cotton up my nose now. Don't forget, you can use all sorts of foliage to dry. This is the nice grey foliage, that dries well. Again, just hang upside down and let it dry out naturally in your warm, dry place. But grey foliage does lend itself quite well for drying. If you find after a time that your arrangement's getting a bit tired and dusty, then a good thing is to take a kettle and with the steam just hold it underneath the flowers and the foliage just to give it a sort of an uplift so that they retake on their old look again. Gets rid of the dust and it makes them all perk up. Right, the idea with a triangle arrangement is that you're going to come out on either side of the arrangement. If you're doing a pedestal, the height upwards should be 1.5 times the height of your original container. So it gives you a bit of an idea how tall you should start off that way. This one obviously is on the ground, so it doesn't really matter how high I want to come, apart from it looking too top heavy when it's finished. A lot of these silver foliages have a lovely smell. I mean, the curry plant has obviously got a fairly strong curry smell. This is a type of mint, so this has got a really minty smell. And we're going to do this one all shades of blue, so I've got some lavender here, so that's going to be nice and smelly as well. We've got the blue tails. And again, if they'll go in without wiring, fair enough. And some light blue teasels. They're very dominant anyway, and we've already got the dominant cotton, so the paler blue ones make a nice line coming the other way. Don't forget these are dyed teasels. You wouldn't naturally get them this blue colour, but they would dry off a nice brown if you're just going to use them as a natural one. But do mind the spiky bits on the stems as you cut them, because they're very prickly. And also, if you're not careful, they'll spread all over the garden and you'll have these massive weeds growing, because they are quite tall. Another thing that's nice to actually dry off is everywhere are the hedgerow type flowers that you see around on the hedgerows and on the verges, because all the seed heads from those will dry off, and you can go and get those from anywhere. The big teasels and the big cow parsley and stuff, because that's wild, but it's a weed, so nobody minds you picking that. And it's nice for Christmas because you can spray them all sorts of lovely colours, golds, and you don't really recognise them as being cow parsley. This is your Achillea or yarrow. I'm using blue because it's a fairly unusual colouring for dried flowers. But of course, if you've got a baby boy or somebody that you want to celebrate in the family, then obviously it's the kind of colours that you might want to look for. These are the creamy helichrysum heads, which we wired onto the wires earlier on in the summer. And the lavender probably looks better in bunches. It's a nice thing to use in baskets as well as a giveaway, because it smells so lovely and people like them for their bedrooms because it gives off this lovely smell. They used to twist the lavender together and make posies to put into their clothing to keep the moths out and to keep a nice smell in their linen cupboards. They're called lavender bags in those days. Don't see them around very often now. This would be a nice arrangement for a sideboard, or again if you've only got a small fireplace, then that's quite a good place for this type of one as well. I would say that the best way of doing the fireplace one, if it's this type, is to put it in the fireplace before you start doing it and work downwards looking at it, because when you're doing things on a table you don't realise the angle that you're using to put the flowers in, and when you put them on the floor below your eye level they look totally different, and you can see all sorts of gaps and things that you couldn't see when you're doing them on a higher level. So it's easier to do them in situ like that. This is a lovely statice And you can buy it really cheaply from your florist and just dry it off. It's like a sea lavender. And if you're lucky enough to buy a sea lavender patch, because obviously they grow by the coast, and once you've got rid of the rather pungent smell, it is really quite an effective filler in, and it's very dainty if you want to use it as the outer points as well. I bought some different things to sort of give you an idea of what you could use. We've already used the cotton in there. This is a curly whirly type of cane, similar to the one we used before, but much more curly, which you could use like that through the arrangement. It gives it quite a modern feel to the arrangement if you wanted it as a modern arrangement. Again, 3s and 5s are quite the number that you should be using or looking for. And the other thing I think are lovely are the peacock feathers. They go in with these type of colourings. Some people say they're unlucky, but I think they're beautiful, and I like to use them in different types of flower arranging if I can get hold of any. They have a most beautiful eye in the middle, which shimmers. Just an idea that you could use. Right, just put this bit in the middle where I can probably find a gap. If you haven't got this statice, you could use your gypsophila that you've kept from an arrangement that's maybe been given you, or you've bought from your florist, because that is nice and dainty for your edges as well. The idea being that you have your heavier things in the middle, or where your eye is going to go into the centre of the arrangement, and then you have your lighter colours and lighter textures to the outside. And we've kept to a triangle shape. Just clear the front of it a bit because it gets a bit cluttered at the front. I was going to put these star flowers in, but they are a bit, they're green, and I don't think they, unless I was going to use more of the lovely peacock feathers, they're not really going to go. That's quite a nice shape for a hotel. They tend to use a lot of front-facing arrangements on their windowsills and reception desks. There are lots of different types that you can hang onto a wall. These ones all being the woodeny type things. This is like a windmill sail, which we put the dried flowers across the middle. And you can either having it that way or that way. Then we have the big wreath we showed you earlier, which we're going to use in a minute, and a smaller one, which is just tied round, twigs just tied round with a main one of a honeysuckle. And then you can get a carpet beater. This is just a mock-up one or a proper one, and you can glue gun your flowers to the centre here or up the stem, which we're going to do in a minute. Or this one, which is in fact got a gap down here to put the oasis into down here, so that you can use it as a nice, almost like a butterfly wall hanging. But they don't take many flowers, so they're nice and economical to use. And they look quite pretty, especially on a nice plain wall. And it means you can use them time after time and just change the flowers round. Let's clear the decks, and we're going to start with this big wreath. I'm going to do this wreath in reds because it's quite a nice colour, and you can use it for the Christmas decorations as well. I'm going to start off by putting the Glycerine Beach as the base big leaf and some of the dried bracken to come out on either side. I'm going to do it at the bottom. If you wanted to, you could do them one at each side and one at the top, but for the purposes of showing you how to do it, I'm just going to do it at the bottom. Again, you need your glue gun to just run it along the things you're going to stick on. With these wreaths, you've got some nice gaps so you can kind of wedge it in as you go as well, which is useful. Put the bracken in. Unfortunate things with the bracken is it does tend to break up rather easily, so you have to be quite gentle with it. If you can just get it underneath one that will help it catch as well, that's a great help. That's the bit that's going to hang down, because obviously when you're holding it up that way, it's going to look different to doing it on the flat. There is a type of pottery clay that dries. It's called dry hard, or some just like a clay, and you can put a blob on the middle and then push your flowers into it. But we don't happen to have got any because we use the glue gun a lot now. But it is an idea if you haven't got access to one and you can find any of that in your florist. It's not quite such a common thing now as it was a few years ago. Or you could make up a base from, say, soap powder that's been done very dry with just a drop of water, so it actually forms a solid mass when it dries out. Right, that's your base bit of foliage. Right, do the outside bits first. These are the contents from a mixed box that we showed you earlier. It has quite a nice selection of different things in it. So you should have plenty, if you get one of these, to do lots of different types of arrangements. Again, just keep them together and pop it underneath like that. Feather it out so it's not one thick dollop. These are different grasses. If you get the grasses in the summer on a nice dry day, it's amazing how pretty they look when they're put into arrangements. But you have to catch them before the seeds are set, otherwise they tend to shatter a bit. And you must make sure you pick them when they're very dry. If you get them damp, then they'll just rot off at a later date. And all your hard work will be for nothing then. They're also quite pretty for drying off as a pressing item for pictures. The little grasses, they're a bit of a pain to put into pictures because they're so thin, but they look very pretty. And you can use your glue gun for that type of thing as well. Notice that we're bringing the slightly heavier things now into the middle. And you can use up all your little bits of wire you've cut off from other bits to just catch them together. Don't hold them for too long, otherwise your fingers will get stuck to it as well. You can use your cones in this as well, and you can use beech nuts or acorns as well. Just glue gun them on, and then they make a quite an effective festive ring. These are the wild oats. Make sure you get them on the side that it's not going to bend in the wrong direction. You've taken off anything that's broken in the first place. You've caught all the loose bits together like that. Oh, some little shimmery shakes. I think these are lovely. They've got a nice rustly sound. If you get a stream, you have to pull it off, otherwise it gets stuck on just about everything when you come to put it on. They do get a bit stuck together, so you have to kind of shake them loose a bit. If you shake them very gently, they separate it a bit easier that way. Right. These are the nice big heads that we're going to use for the centre bit. Again, trying to keep my fingers well out of the way. A couple of the bigger grass heads. This would be quite a nice one to have your cones put into, and you could spray those silver, which would go nicely with the red for Christmas. Right, just fill in with these red dyed flowers. You could use berries. There's some nice artificial berries now that look very realistic, and as berries don't tend to dry very well, they tend to shrivel up a bit. The plasticky variety, when they're mixed in with this type of thing, look very realistic, and I don't think you'd be able to tell that they weren't real unless you went and picked them, went up and touched them. Just going to put a couple more flowers into here so that it's not quite so flat. Take off any of the streamers of glue, and then you're going to have a lovely idea for putting on your wall or for giving somebody else as a lovely Christmas present and a permanent reminder of your family or friendship. There we go. This is a little carpet beater I've half started because it's just exactly the same type of thing as the wreath we've just done. You just literally glue your glue onto the back and put them onto the runners. This is tansy head, which is yellow, and again it grows easily in the garden and it's a good filler in for flower beds. It's also a herb. But it has nice little yellow heads, and you can get them each bit separated if you want to be as daring as all that, just to put on there. These are the bits of statice. which we've cut down, and the helichrysum heads as we had on the other one, to lighten it up a bit because it's a bit of a bland colour when it's just the brown at the background. Right, we're nearly finished, and then it gives you just an idea of a different type of wall hanging that's not difficult to do at all. We've used some of the Nigella heads in here, and just to give you a nice bit of green, and I'm just going to bring it out slightly by putting these in at a more upright angle. In the middle there, so it's not quite such a flat space. If you're doing things on a flat surface, they do tend to come out rather flat onto the thing that you're using, so to bring them up a little bit from the surfaces gives you a different level. Put it in around the side there. You've got use eucalyptus leaves at the bottom, which we've again air dried. There we are, one carpet beater. The butterfly wall hanging, you need your little bit of dry foam. If you cut a small piece off, it will just slide in between these two bits here, which enables you to push in your flowers. It doesn't matter if it goes straight through because it can't fall out because it's held well in there. So you've got your background. And then we're going to use Pocostatis. This is a lovely pale purpley colour, and it's very easy to grow and very easy to dry, and it has these nice almost rat's taily look. It grows quite well from seed, but it's an annual, so you need to plant it each year, but you should get a good crop from it. So food, quite quick and simple, just filling in with that. And then we've got some helichrysums, some pink ones on their wires, and again you can bend them now with their heads like that, so that they can show front facing. That's a bit shorter. That's where one had gone, fallen on the floor. Needed a bit longer, so I'll just get a wire and make it slightly longer by joining the two wires together, like that. You don't want to have your flowers exactly on the same level if you can avoid it. And then we've got a couple of cones that we've wired, as I showed you how to do earlier. And then you can, if you want to, glue gun some of the helichrysums further down onto here. Just to make a pattern to come on down to the bottom. Right, so it's nice and quick, and you don't need many varieties of flowers to do it. Shells make beautiful and fairly unusual dried flower containers. This is a beautiful big one, but I'm going to in fact use the smaller of the two. Let's put that over there. I'm going to get some fronds of bracken, but as it's very small, I only need just the actual leaves from it. So I'm just going to wire these up so I can just pop them in as an individual frond, like that. A bit smaller than this and it will be miniature flower arranging, which we hope to cover in a different video. That one I can go at the top. Just going to put a bit of statice in. At the top. And some of the very feathery statice. The nice thing about shells is that they can be used as a table centre when you place items around them, or they're a very good way of using up the shells that the children have brought home from foreign places and you don't know what to do with them and they sit and gather dust. Really, it's just the ends, so any little bits that you've been using and have got some small pieces left over, these miniature type ones are a beautiful way of using them up. This is a bit of achillea. I've got some of the very small poppy heads from the Icelandic poppies. Whoops, a couple of the windflowers or helichrysum, like that. A couple of the little rabbit's paws, rabbit's tails rather. You have to be quite gentle how you get these very thin stems in, otherwise they break. Oops. If you wanted to make doubly sure, you could always glue gun them, but I was trying to not use the glue gun on this particular arrangement for you. Put a wire on there, make it a bit stiffer. It's got it. Couple of these minute little heads. Making a nice group in the centre around the darker helichrysum head. That's it. Just a few at the top. Right, it doesn't look very much like that, but you can actually move it around and put the shell down in quite a few different directions as well. And if you pop it on a base, it gives a different dimension again. And you can include it, let's put it around that way, and perhaps you can put as a background an ornament of some sort. And if you've got any little bits of your dry gypsophila in it, you could always add that instead of your statice from your bouquets that you've been given, just to make it nice and light. Recently we've had some really interesting little plaques come on the market. This one actually has a little mirror in it. Sometimes they come with the flowers already put on, but if they haven't and you want to add them, then all you need to do is to have your glue gun as usual, put your little dobble on the back and put it where the little flower arrangement looks like it ought to belong. There are lots of different types of these around at the moment, and we do a whole selection of them, which makes them really useful for little Christmas presents, because you can buy them and put your own little flowers on, or you can have them already done. These flowers are very delicate. They come in big bunches like that, but you do have a tendency to find some of them get squashed very easily, so you have to be very gentle when you're using them. Last one. Pop it in. Now we have a little mirror and its little bowl of flowers. There's a multitude of different types of baskets on the market. This is a beautiful duck. Then we have the wickerwork type of basket, and this one which has a lid, which you can fill from inside, put puri in, and you can do a glue gun arrangement on here or across the back on the top of the lid here. This one I've just started to do. So you can see I've put in the statice and the tails and some bits of grasses, and I've just done them into bunches of 3 or 4 and pushed them in. This is the blue statice, the one that you can grow in the garden quite easily. I'm just going to finish this off because you can see it's a nice circular arrangement, and if you wanted to do something like this on a dish or a plate or a saucer, then this is the type of one that you'd need to follow. I'm going to put some bits of lavender in, some small helichrysum heads, and some little bits of gypsophila. As you can see, everything always manages to get itself entwined around each other. Right. Put the lavender into groups, 3 or 5s, and the dry foam is at the bottom, put on with a frog as we did before. This is an all-round arrangement, so you literally go round making sure that you get little groups so that it's circular and not dropped on one side. And with the lavender it's going to smell really nice as well. I've wired up the grasses because they tend to fall apart a bit when you're trying to push them in, but these have got very stiff stems, so they're easy to push into the foam at the bottom. I have to put this on a wire because it's quite thin and it breaks easily, the Gypsophila stems. This is more the type that you're probably used to seeing, being fairly circular amount of flowers. A lot of people tend to do them this way, where they're massed together, and then the main flowers are pushed in level with the others. If you make sure there's no bit sticking out of your stems, you'll find it easier to push in and you won't make such a big hole in your foam when you go to pull it out at a later date. It means you can use the foam probably again for another arrangement another year. A bit on this side so that it evens it out. Want to go in there. A little bit of the bright pink broom, just to brighten it up a little bit. The thing with this is that you can always add this at a later date. When you've had it in the room 3 or 4 weeks, you can always just add a little bit more to it, and then it'll change the pattern and the colour for you. And everybody will think you've got a new basket. If you wanted to, you could add your ribbons to this type of one, as I'd showed you wiring up earlier on. Especially if you haven't got very many different colours, you can get the ribbon in different colours to suit your room, and then you can pick up the colours that you need from those. There you go, it's a nice roundy basket which you can use as a table centre or a present, or you can use that then on a saucer or a dish of some sort. Last but not least, we have the copper kettle. I had a great deal of difficulty getting this into the top, so what I've done is I've cut up several bits of Oasis and put them inside first. Then this last section I've cut and just shaped to fit into the top here. And I've put a wedge in the back of one of the pieces that I cut off. And I'm going to use the different bits of glycerine foliage, the piece of beech. I'm just going to put the lid in there so that it's a nice centre section for me. This is naturally dried bracken, and you can see how it twists. It was just hung up to dry, so it's not flat. Copper and brass make very nice bases for dried flowers as well as the wooden bits. And the glycerine bracken, just to give you a good background. So the only trouble with the dried flowers is that you don't have so much foliage to play around with as you do with the fresh flowers, and you have these problems of being able to look straight through the arrangement to the other side. This is the Gypsophila that's been dyed. Normally you're used to seeing it white, but they've dyed it this violent orange colour, which looks quite nice with the copper. I've actually just started to wire some of the bottoms up because I want a fairly large bunch and it will make a thick hole when I try and push it in, but the wires will help me keep it in. That's the back one. And there's one for the front. And one for this bit down here. I'm going to add in some of the Achillea. Again, it comes naturally yellow, but this is done this really bright orange. This is going to be the fiery last arrangement. And some thick teasels. This will brighten your room up and make it nice and warm. The reds and the oranges are warm colours so that they make the room and things make it nice and cheerful, ready for the fires in the autumn time. In the booklet you'll find all the information you need to know about glycerining, because it's very difficult for you to write it down while I'm talking, so I haven't really described how to do it too much, but in the booklet you'll find all the instructions for glycerining, for drying and for pressing, and you won't need to write it down because you'll have all the information in front of you then. These are the companion heads, which are, again, tend to grow as a weed, but if you get them when they're nice and green and dry them, then you'll find they make a lovely addition to your dried flower arranging. Don't forget the roses. You can dry roses exactly the same way as you do the other things. These are peach roses, and they're extremely prickly with large thorns on them, so be careful you don't catch yourself when you're putting roses into your arrangement. They always seem to be much more pricklier when they're dry than they are when they're fresh. You can dry your wedding bouquets and you can dry your corsages by just leaving them in a warm, dry place. As I said before, they'll come out rather a peculiar shade of orangey, yellowy cream colours, the white, but at least it will be a permanent reminder of your day. That's the roses. These are the biddens, which have these rather nice tassels at the top of their dried heads. This arrangement would be nice with the orange flowers in the middle of here that you can dry off the seal ones. Push that in there. Right, I think that's nearly finished. Press that into there. Got any more holes in the thing? At the front here where because they're fairly quick to do, you can always change them around on a fairly regular basis then, and just use the flowers in another one, just move the things in rotation. Right, let's see how that looks with the elephant brought in as a focal point in the front. Take that to the back. Well, that wasn't too difficult, was it? And I'm sure you're going to have great fun doing like the basket and the kettle during the winter months when you've gone out and got all your seed heads and pods and you've hung them up to dry. Don't forget, the flowers, once you've done them, are there forever. You've only got to dust them off every so often and you can use them from year to year. If you've actually enjoyed this video and you'd like to see any of the others in the series, you'll find a list in the back of the leaflet, along with the sundries list if you have a problem trying to find the wires and the tapes that we've used in the series. So go out, have really good fun looking around at the new things that you can see, pods, seed heads and all the other things, and have a really good time and enjoy doing it. Thank you very much, and I hope I'll see you on another video. Goodbye.